Good morning. The first category will not satisfy hunters for tasty tidbits about faults and problems, because there are exceptionally few of them typical for the Astra J. Let's take the bodywork. Anti-corrosion protection is very good, and in accident-free cars, rust is basically not something to be afraid of. There are also no major complaints about the quality of assembly, both of the bodywork and the interior. The latter issue is important because the Opel Astra 4th generation, according to many opinions, has a better assembled interior than the larger and, as new, more expensive Insignia 1st generation, although sometimes plastics creak on uneven surfaces. Moisture in the cabin may occur, as may steamy headlights. There are more comments to be made about the electrical equipment and electronics, but there is no tragedy here either. The effectiveness of the ventilation and air conditioning system is rated low, windows fog up, compressor failures occur, parking sensors and brake and clutch pedal position sensors may cause problems. Sometimes the multimedia system goes crazy or freezes, although this is more common in older cars. If the battery discharges prematurely, it is worth checking the current draw. It can be too high. The next category is also quite kind to the Astra J. Typical problems of this model do not go beyond what users are treated to in cars from competitors. What exactly are we talking about? Mainly play on both axles. They can appear, for example, in the steering system, on silent blocks, or on joints. Another typical fault is the failure of the electric power steering. Some report noisy brakes. The problem usually concerns the yoke. The following petrol engines were used in the Opel Astra: 1.4 twin-port, 87 or 100 HP. 1.6 twin-port, 115 HP. 1.4 turbo, 120 or 140 HP, in the more powerful version, also with factory LPG installation. 1.6 turbo, 180 HP. 1.6 city turbo, 170 or 200 HP. 2.0 turbo, OPC, 280 HP. In terms of durability and reliability, the weakest engines, the naturally aspirated 1.4 twin-port, are a good choice. Unfortunately, the Opel Astra 1V is a heavy car. It weighs from less than 1,400 to over 1,600 kilograms. Cascada weighs 100 to 200 kilograms more. So these units are more for calm drivers, especially the weaker version, 15.1s to 100 kilometers per hour. It might seem that the 1.6 engine recommended in older Astra HS would be an interesting proposition, but not entirely. In the Astra J, there are problems with the head gasket, as well as with the variable valve timing system. Sometimes the bolts securing the valve cover break. The next suggestion is the 1.4 turbo engines, usually highly recommended. There are at least a few reasons for this. They have much more spunk than naturally aspirated engines. They are popular, and therefore do not pose a challenge for most mechanics, and they are also quite suitable for LPG. However, they also have their drawbacks. Problems with the intake manifold, a damaged valve cover diaphragm, and a fragile flywheel are usually mentioned. The oil cooler, which can leak, is not very durable. If you dig even deeper, you can come across reports of cylinder head and turbine failures, but this does not seem to be a plague. Those looking for something a bit more powerful may be interested in the 1.6 turbo engines, but note, there were two generations of these engines, significantly different in design. It is worth remembering this, because the displacement is identical, 1598 cm3. The older one has multi-point fuel injection, belt-driven timing, 180 HP, and the code name A16LET. It was produced until November 2012. It was replaced by the 170 horsepower A16XHT engine with direct fuel injection and a timing chain, and a year later its 200 horsepower version, A16SHT, joined the range. Information about the faults of both versions is quite scarce in most sources, which can be considered good news. Attention is drawn to the cooling system failures and the associated risk of using LPG installations, and in newer city variants, there may be oil leaks from the front of the engine. Sometimes the belt pulley has the wrong diameter. Interestingly, this is not the only Opel engine where many substitutes on the market simply have the wrong dimensions. It is worth ensuring that spark plugs are replaced on time and not experimenting with their selection. The top Astra Js were equipped with 2-liter, 280 horsepower A20 NFT engines. They are considered durable and noteworthy units, and in addition, they usually hold power, and sometimes have more torque than the manufacturer promised. Many copies in the completely standard specification reach at least 430 Newton meters instead of the catalog 400. A certain problem may be the so-called turbo lag below 2,000 revolutions per minute, but this is not a defect. This type has it. It is worth taking an interest in the condition of the timing drive. Most sources do not mention it as a trouble spot, but you can come across information that it is a problematic element in the first-generation Insignias with the same engine. The fourth-generation Opel Astra was available with the following diesel engines: 1.3 CDTI, 95 HP, 1.7 CDTI, 110, 125, or 130 horsepower, 1.6 CDTI, 110 or 136 HP, 2.0 CDTI, 160 or 165 HP, 2.0 CDTI, bi-turbo, 195 HP. 1.3 CDTI is an old friend which we associate with models such as the Fiat 500 and Panda. And as you would expect from an old friend, it has not changed its advantages, or disadvantages at all over all these years. Among the latter, apart from a rather narrow range of useful revolutions, this type has it. We should mention primarily problems with the timing drive, the chain stretches. The risk of a premature problem is slightly lower if someone watches the oil level and takes care of possible refilling and replacement, no less than once a year or every 15,000 kilometers. In addition, you can expect problems with the control valve on the turbocharger, the stem seizes, leaks from the injection pump, and average durability of the exhaust gas recirculation valve, EGR. The 1.7 CDTI unit by Isuzu is also an older design. This is a much more interesting option than the 1.3, more dynamic and reliable. Potential problems include uneven operation and DPF and injection system failures. In 2014, the 1.7 engines were replaced by the more cultured 1.6 CDTI. These are not bad designs, but there are also problems with the timing chain drive. In addition, the 1.6 diesels are expensive to repair compared to other diesels. 2.0 CDTI are the most recommended engines. Like 1.3 CDTI, they are Fiat designs, but much more successful. They are based on older 1.9 units. They have durable injection systems, turbines, or dual-mass flywheels, but woe to those who forget about the inconspicuous oil pump strainer gasket. Over time, it gets swollen, which leads to reduced lubrication pressure and, as a consequence, to damage to the bearings and seizure of the drive unit. Preventative, periodic replacement of the gasket allows you not to worry about this issue. Typical problems include DPF malfunction and timely replacement of the timing belt. The bi-turbo version does not show increased failure rate, although its current servicing may be slightly more expensive. Not much good can be said about the manual gearboxes in most Astra J variants. The turbocharged 1.4 and 1.6 petrol engines, as well as the 1.6 and 1.7 diesels, were paired with the problematic M32 gearboxes. Although improved components, with enlarged bearings and an improved lubrication system, this can be recognized by the appearance of the housing, should have been used since 2012, according to users of these cars. Even the newer gearboxes are not as reliable as one might expect. One of the problems was the fact that these transmissions, at least the older ones, were filled with too little oil from the factory and not particularly high-quality oil. Then General Motors changed its type, but in any case, independent services recommend using better quality lubricants, e.g. Fuchs or Ravenol. In practice, anyone who already has such a car or is considering buying it should remember to change the oil in the gearbox, and not just once, but every 60,000 kilometers at most. If the gearbox has been overhauled, the first oil change should take place before driving 10,000 kilometers. The workshop that carried out the overhaul will provide precise guidelines. The versions with 2-liter engines, both diesel and OPC petrol, had F40 gearboxes installed. It may not be a model of precision, but these transmissions do not cause problems. The situation is slightly worse in the case of F17 gearboxes in 1.3 CDTI, where a typical failure is damage to the input shaft, but nevertheless it is a more successful gearbox than the M32 before the changes. Optionally, the compact Opel could be equipped with a 6-speed automatic, with the gearbox model differing depending on the engine version of the car. The 2.0 CDTI diesels, except bi-turbo, were offered with Aisin AF40 gearboxes, while the petrol engines used General Motors gearboxes, 6T30 and 6T45. The Aisin has a reputation for being rather lazy and not fond of dynamic driving, but if used gently, it should cover quite a lot of ground. Those interested in such cars should, however, aim for newer models. Older gearboxes may have limited durability due to some components manufactured in China. The Aisin remains a better option than the GM gearboxes, though. The 6T30 has issues with clutch basket damage and can lose a few gears, while the theoretically more powerful 6T45 suffers from a cracking wave spring ring, which leads to metal shrapnel flying around the gearbox and causing havoc. No. Provided that we do not insist on a petrol car with an automatic gearbox or do not get stuck with a damaged M32 gearbox. The remaining faults and problems are not only not a plague, but also do not stand out against the list of faults encountered in the competition. This means that the Opel Astra IV may indeed be an interesting option for someone looking for a normal car for everyday driving, although the top model OPC also stands out positively, to make the whole thing a little lighter. And if you know of any common errors, your comments are welcome.
CarMePro Website ist Katalog aller Automarken, Motoren, Getriebe. Was bricht und bei welchem Kilometerstand? Welche Pakete können Ihre Tasche hart belasten? Dieses und vieles mehr über Autos erfahren Sie auf CarMePro.